Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you here to the 13th race of the season for the RTG Tally Challenge. This is playoff race number 3, race number 1 of the second round of the playoffs. It starts to get down to the nitty-gritty here. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Zach Fremont. And Zach, if we go back 3 weeks ago to the first playoff race, we saw Joe DeSpirito get his first win. He knew he was locked into the round of 8. He was able to then follow it up with a victory the following week, going back-to-back. But here tonight, the stakes are higher for the 8 drivers that move on to this second round. If you win here tonight, you're locked into the championship battle in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. I think if you're anybody that isn't the number 24 right now, that is exactly what you want to do. Joe DeSpirito comes into tonight with a tremendous hot streak going. However, if you look at our qualifying leaderboard, he did not win the pole, as we have seen him do about 95% of the season so far. He will be starting tonight in 4th position. However, being the second round of the playoffs, that also comes with a points reset, Seth. So Joe DeSpirito, after a tremendous regular season, winning the regular season by, quite a large margin and coming out and just dominating the first 2 races of the playoffs, he finds himself again on even footing for the race number 1 of segment number 2 tonight.
Yeah, a lot of drivers with the reformatted points are situated with bonus points that they got dependent on where they finished out the first round of the playoffs. You mentioned the fact that DeSpirito didn't get the pole here tonight. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment, as your pole sitter this evening is a driver making his first start of the season. Our pre-race driver here is another driver that's making his first start of the season. I recollect, I think it was the first Tally Challenge race that was broadcasted here on FRN. This guy had the first blowover that we broadcasted, but he's going to be taking the green flag here tonight for the first time this season, and that's Hank Middleton. Hey, Hank, it's Seth and Zach up here in the Flatout Racing Network Studios. You got us?
I do, sir. How you doing, sir?
Well, we're doing great. It's great to see you back here racing in the Tally Challenge. So you're coming in here making your first start right in the middle of the playoffs. So what's the goal out there for that Monster Energy machine?
Just gotta get back in the groove again. I've had some stuff to do with the family, some other stuff, so I've been out most of the season. But I just want to get back in the racing groove with the guys and have some fun and just have a good race.
Hey, Hank, it's Zach up here in the booth. Long time no talk, my friend. I hope business hasn't been too hectic for you. I hope you and your family has stayed safe and healthy to this point in 2020. It's good to see you back out on the grid again tonight. What do you think your chances of getting up there and slicing and dicing for a winner?
We'll see. Like I said, I've first of all, you guys have been great. I've watched you the whole season, and guys do a fantastic job. But we'll just have to see what happens. Just go with the flow and just see what happens. That's all I can tell you.
Well, Hank, we certainly wish you the best of luck. Strap up tight. Going to be a good one here this evening. Best of luck to you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Likewise.
As mentioned here, with Hank making his first start of the season, you can see we have a brand new pole sitter. That is the 44 Wrangler Chevrolet Camaro of Jason Scheck. And my goodness, was it close for the pole here this week. Your top 4 there of Scheck, McClure, Seminara, and DeSpirito. 3 1,000ths of a second separated those top 4.
Yeah, those are some pretty impressive lap times there up there at the top of the board. Your top 5, as you mentioned, only separated by 7 1,000ths of a second. No surprise to see the Florida gang occupying spots 3, 4, and 5. But I'll tell you what, don't sleep on Jason Scheck. Scheck, this may be his first race so far this season, but he is an experienced veteran when it comes to super speedway, and he's a guy that I would expect to see contending for the win at the end of the night.
And of course, we have to remember too, we had Jeremy Jeffries, Tim Knofsker, they kind of entered in midway portion of the season, and then we started getting closer to the end of the regular season. We were considering them as drivers to make it into the playoffs. So certainly drivers that are popping up here in the closing stages of the season could play a factor into the playoff standings.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely say so. There are a lot of guys that are fully capable of coming out here and winning races. Guys that, maybe didn't even make the playoffs this season just because it was so fast and it was so competitive. A lot of the guys that won most of the races are the guys that locked themselves into the playoff spots. Like one of the major upsets that we have, Josh Metallic was eliminated in round number 1. I don't think that's something that anybody saw coming. So he's a guy that he could go up there and spoil. You got other guys like Jeff Crivello, we've seen him running up at the front, Richard Martin in the 43, just to name a couple that we haven't talked so much when it comes to, points and playoff situations, but it just goes to show the parity of this field. What do we got for a starting lineup tonight, Seth?
Well, we got Jason Scheck lining up here on the pole position. First start, first pole here of season 51. Chuck McClure to his outside. Bob Seminara and Joe DeSpirito in row 2. Bernie Mobbs completing the top 5. Then is Jessica Shelton lined up 6th. Grant Wesley in 7th. Donnie Garrett 8th. Mark Paglia in 9th. And completing the top 10 is Josh Metallic. 6 of our playoff contenders starting up here inside of the top 10. Jeremy Jeffries and Tim Nofsker, they're going to make up row 6. Chris Elliott and Billy Ellis are in row 7. Ronnie Sullins and Wiley Coate in 15th and 16th. Rest of your top 20, Jerm Lewis, Perry Bond, Bobby Farrell, and Jay Crivello. Chris Emery, he's going to start this race in 21st. John Godfrey in 22nd. Glenn Harrison 23rd. 24th, Richard Martin. Manny D will be 25th alongside of Dave Melson. Those were the drivers that took time. 27th is going to be Stefan Martel. 28th, Wayne Pribnow. Then behind them, you've got Cy Jones and Dante Ricky making up row 15. Hank Middleton, who we just talked to, is going to start 31st. Andre Mahjong will be 32nd. And then it'll be Brian Lavelle and Bob Dixon bringing up the rear of the field. We have 34 drivers scheduled to take the green flag for tonight's race.
Good size field for race number 1 of segment 2 of the playoffs, Seth. We've essentially taken the eraser to the blackboard. Everything that we've seen throughout the regular season and throughout stage number 1 of the playoffs, those points are all gone. Everybody on even footing again. The 8 guys in contention for the championship are just as close as they have been all season long. What do you expect to see tonight?
I think we're going to see some varying strategies here as Scheck's going to bring us down to take the green flag. As you mentioned, 18 points separate these 8 drivers now, and we saw a couple of drivers electing not to really qualify in this race or didn't qualify up towards the front. Elliser starting outside the top 10, and Dante Ricky kind of going back to the strategy he had at the beginning of the season, starting at the rear of the field.
Yeah, and as they work their way off turn number 2, Seth, I think that's something that we've seen pretty consistently. It helps to start up front. You feel good when you can start up front. You know you're fast. It helps that confidence out a lot. But, if you're not one of those guys that has started up front in the top 5 or 6 all season long, I don't think it plays that big of a factor starting from the rear. We saw it work out quite a bit for Dante Ricky, Billy Elliser, who's really put on a really good performance as we saw through the first stage in the playoffs here. Anything is fair game at this point. Right now, we've got 3 wide coming to the line. The first 6 cars side by side before you get to your first 3 wide heading down into turn number 1.
Chuck McClure, during qualifying, was on the pole before Jason Scheck had that last-minute snipe of the pole position, but McClure will get the bonus point for leading the first lap here tonight. You've got the 39 of Josh Metallic up there on the top side, and 2 weeks ago, these drivers, of course, had the Thanksgiving break last week, but 2 weeks ago, the elimination race was not good for the Blue Ovals. Both of the Fords of Metallic and Paglia eliminated, leaving us with 5 Chevrolets, 2 Dodges, and 1 Toyota left to battle for this championship.
Yeah, and those are a couple drivers that we saw perform exceptionally well, especially in the second half of the regular season. However, round number 1 of the playoffs was not kind to either one of those drivers. Right now, as we come across the line again, we've got 3 wide for the race lead. Scheck leading on the low side, McClure now in the middle, Metallic up on top. Each car carrying a respectable number of cars behind it, working their way off turn number 2. Now Scheck with the advantage on the bottom.
And I want to go back here to that 39 of Metallic, making this aggressive move early up on that 3rd line. I mean, we talked about the fact that Scheck coming into this race, not battling for the championship, so he can be aggressive. We go back, to when DeSpirito got his first win. He knew he was locked in the round of 8, so he was able to be aggressive the following week to try and pick up a second win, which he did. it's almost kind of the same scenario here for Josh Metallic, with the fact that now he doesn't really have to worry about, keeping himself out of trouble, preserving a spot in the playoffs with being eliminated 2 weeks ago. Now he can be aggressive to try and go out there and get his first win of the season.
Oh, 100% agree with that. And if I know Josh at all, right now, not being able to secure a win in the regular season and being knocked out in stage number 1 of the playoffs, he's just as hungry as he's ever been. As we now see that top line trailing back to about the 7th or 8th position now. It looks like they've just lost a little bit of momentum right now. The bottom line looking like the fast way around. Jason Scheck leading them down into turn number 3, being pushed by the 7-12 of Seminara. However, the 17 of McClure, 24 of Despirito, they look to be trying to make a run off of turn number 4.
They got Jessica Shelton up there with them as well. And, a thing that I don't think we stressed quite as much about during the first 2 playoff races, but with seeing the way the points were reformatted, it really was important, was the driver's ability to remain consistent during that first round of those 8 that moved on, because, as I stated, where they finished in the first round of the playoffs determined how many bonus points they then carried here into this second round with the reformatted points, and also put as much stress on the ability to win races during the regular season, because every driver that had a win or 2 from that first round, those bonus points carried over into the second round.
Well, with the exception of the 39 of Metallic and the 28 of Paglia, who were, of course, eliminated in round number 1, this is a huge advantage for those guys that were trailing Despirito all season long and through round number 1. This puts them on an even footing, so to speak, once again, as we see now that middle line being led by the 7-12 of Seminara. They've got a pretty good run right now. They've got what appears to be the most momentum in those first 5 or 6 cars, and they're 3 wide behind them into turns 1 and 2.
You got Seminara, McClure, Despirito, Shelton, Garrett, and Wesley now all clear in that middle line. Chris Elliott now battling for the 7th position side by side with Jason Scheck, who just doesn't have them formulated on that inside line well enough. Mark Paglia, Jerm Lewis trying to get up there to his back bumper, but not able to quite get there and allow that 44 to be able to move back up to the front. So now looks like top 7 all going to be single file here for the moment.
Yep, and it looks like the number 90 of Bernie Mob's going to join them, making that 8 cars. Scheck will fade up in line behind him, making that 9 cars single file in the middle of the racetrack, working their way through the tri-oval across the start-finish line. That's something that we've seen a lot this season, though, Seth. When that bottom line can really hook up and run well together, it can be very dominant. However, when you lose even 1 car out of the first 3 or so, and maybe one's not quite up to snuff, bump drafting the way that the others are, that bottom line loses all momentum. And that's what we're seeing again here tonight. Right now, again, predominantly that middle lane, which was so dominant through the regular season, through round 1 of the playoffs, seems to be the fast way around here. Scheck now looking at that 2nd and a half lane on the outside of the number 8 of Jeffries coming off turn 4 now, though.
Yeah, very close to that right rear quarter panel. They're through 3 and 4. Josh Metallic offering the drafting help to the 44. Tim Nofsker up there as well. Currently, 6 of our 8 playoff contenders up inside of the top 10. You see on the right side of your screen, the 26 of Billy Ellis, or he is 16th. And Dante Ricky doesn't look like he's really in any hurry to get to the front, currently just riding in the 24th position.
No, and with only 8 laps in, there's no reason to rush. As long as that things aren't too dicey, it doesn't look like there's going to be a giant melee in front of you, which could potentially ruin your day early. There's nothing wrong with just kind of riding where you are in the back of the pack. It's everything will build up. We see a lot of single file right now, as we see the first 10 or 11 cars are single file in that middle line, but it's not going to stay this way for very long. Eventually, they're going to end up doubling back up. Somebody's going to dart out of that front line of those leaders that are setting the pace right now, and we're going to see 2 and 3 wide again here shortly.
Yeah, and of course, we also have to bear in mind that maybe, just maybe, these drivers, if they continue to run in this kind of formation, they may be looking towards that first round of green flag pit stops somewhere between lap 18 to 20. And we know from the regular season, pit road can definitely play a factor and hinder some of these playoff contenders.
Yeah, and if we see something that tends to repeat itself, I don't think in recent memory I can recall a race that went the completion to the first round of green flag pit stops before the first yellow flag came out. However, we have seen a little bit of everything so far this season, so I wouldn't count it out just yet. Right now, Sheck on that high line being I called him Shrek, even though his name is Sheck. I don't know. I think everybody does that. Being pushed by the 39 of Metallic and the 088 of Nosker. Just a few of them up there right now, though. Not a whole lot of help. The leaders, the first 9 or 10 cars, still at a tremendous advantage in that middle line. Everybody pretty much relaxed. Nobody making any moves that are overly aggressive at this point.
Yeah, the big problem right now for Jason Sheck and company is the fact that the cars up ahead of them are running in that middle group. If they were running down in the bottom line, maybe we'd see the 44, the 39, and others making forward progress. But because of the fact that they're in that preferred middle line and not really having to check up for each other going into the entrance of the corner, that's allowing them to maintain their gap.
Well, I think Jeremy Jeffries jumping up in front of them right now, that may play to their advantage. We've seen it over the last 3 or 4 races, especially where these guys have gotten so competitive over this middle line that they will stack 2 cars side by side in that middle line and run them tight all the way around the racetrack. We see that's exactly what Jeffries is doing now in that number 8 car as he works the outside of Elliott. They've definitely got momentum on that top side. If I'm those guys on the inside line, I think I might start thinking about moving up in front of them, getting a push, which is exactly what Grant Wesley does there.
Yeah, Wesley moved up there. Elliott moves up there as well, and now they will commit to that outside line. So we'll see if the 88 can get enough of a push there, maybe have that little bit of a bubble between himself and the 9 to get up alongside the 77 of Donnie Garrett. And then you got to wonder about these top 5 from Seminara back to Garrett. Do any of them decide to jump up to that outside line?
Yeah, I don't know. I think right now, something interesting that I just saw actually, if you look at about the 11th position is where the number 90 of Bernie Mobs was. Originally, he was running with those guys single file, but when he realized what was happening, knowing that his teammates are up in that middle line running first and third, he kind of stalled out that top line just a little bit by not electing to go with them.
Now we've seen, obviously, Bernie Mobs, Joe DeSpirito, and Bob Seminara all work together. I'm certain they would love to have the scenario where all 3 of them make it into that Final 4, but it's got to be so difficult to kind of manipulate something like that. And as we've talked to them in the past, when it comes down between them at the final laps, it's every man for himself. So it's going to be interesting to watch these guys because the 3 of them come into this race first, second, and fourth in the current reformatted playoff points. So, you know, a win here tonight obviously would lock them into the Final 4, but also, you know, second, third, fourth, anywhere in the top 5 would give them a good chance to lock themselves in through points next week.
And all 3 of those drivers tremendously capable of winning on these super speedways. All 3 of them did so throughout the regular season to lock themselves into the playoffs. Right now, as they work their way into turn number 3, it is Bob Seminara still being pushed by McClure and DeSpirito, but Grant Wesley, he's making a run to the outside of Jessica Shelton, where you see our first 2 wide, but the number 8 of Jeffries, he's going to dive down below Shelton and make it 3 wide into the tri-oval.
Yeah, Grant Wesley, with the benefit of having the 2 wins this season, that kind of helped him at least to be able to be in close proximity to other drivers as far as the playoff standings. But first round of the playoffs was maybe one he would want to forget. That 88 did not have good luck, especially in the closing stages of both of those playoff races. Subsequently finished in the 7th position in the round 1 playoffs and only gained 8 bonus points as a result here for the reformatted round 2 point standings.
Well, and that is kind of odd because we saw how strong and how competitive he was at the beginning of the season. He won the first 2 or 3 out of the first 6 races, only running every other week, and then just kind of hit a wall. I don't know if maybe that's a little bit of a momentum halt from, you know, being in and out as much as he was, but he's yet to kind of rekindle that fire that he had going at the beginning of the season. So right now, Jess Shelton and Grant Wesley are stuck by themselves in that middle line. Everybody else has moved to the bottom, single file for about the first 8 cars before you get to Shelton and Bobby Farrell in the number 45, who are running side by side off too.
And we had a couple near moments there through the tri-oval, a couple of cars getting their left sides down onto that yellow line. Mark Pagley in the 28 and Wayne Pribnow in the 00, and we've seen it before here in the past. That's where the cars get their lightest. And remember, there were a couple of times, a couple of weeks where that tri-oval was really where all the wrecks were taking place. So I'm hoping that this is not kind of foreshadowing anything up in the future, but it looks like these cars having a little bit of trouble there through the tri-oval early on.
Yes, Seth, and just like you said, we did see a couple major incidents in the tri-oval, especially the second half of the regular season. I would say recently that is where we have had the worst of our incidents on track. But right now, everybody seems to have got it sorted back out, single file, as I mentioned before, all the way down the back straightaway, back to about 15th position before you get to your first side-by-side. Hank Middleton, who we talked to at the beginning of the race there, Seth, looks to have worked his way up to about the 13th spot. He's running pretty good out there on the track right now.
Yeah, and he brought up an interesting point when we interviewed him just before going green, and he said his main goal, at least early on, to get back into the rhythm. And you would think that at a super speedway, it's very easy to be able to remember how to run a super speedway, all the tricks of the trade. But as we've stated about how Seminara and Despirito and Wesley and all these guys are able to consistently run at the front, there is an art to it. So how long do you think it takes for a driver that hasn't been behind the wheel for a number of weeks to be able to get used again to racing in a pack at a super speedway the way they do it here at RTG?
Well, something that a lot of people may not realize, especially if you're new to the broadcast, if you're new to the Tally Challenge series, even though we haven't seen or heard of Hank very much at all this season because he hasn't been around, this is a gentleman who has a tremendous amount of experience on super speedways. Just like we mentioned with Sheck at the top of the broadcast, he is one of those guys that I would bank on being up in contention at races end. So even though he's running about mid-pack right now, there's not a whole lot going on. But to be completely honest with you, Seth, probably by about the time he finished with practice, with the first pack of cars that he ran with, he was probably primed and ready to go all over again.
Right now, Hank running in the 12th position behind Wayne Pribb. Now, nice to see that 00 up here close to the top 10. Usually we don't see Wayne run up towards the front early on, almost adopts the Dante Ricky strategy, running at the back in the early portions of this event. And we are starting to close in on when these drivers might think about coming to pit road. They might be pitting this time. Yes, they are.
And it looks like we have the entirety of the Florida gang on pit road, the 28 of Paglia, 45 Farrell as well.
Oh, Bob Seminara just hit the inside wall. I don't know if he got hit from behind, but he nosed it into the pit wall.
No yellow as of yet. However, that was a tremendous impact to the inside wall by the 712. I'm kind of wondering at the rate that he got into pit road, if he may not have, maybe gear hopped just a little bit, locked up those tires. And I also saw the 24 was working his way to the inside, as you mentioned. Didn't see initially if there was any contact, but that is not good at all for the 712 of Seminara, especially when it comes to the race number 1 of playoff stage number 2.
Yeah, it was hard to tell right there, but I think that the 712 did sustain some rear end damage as Crivello. Oh man, they're wrecking again. That's Elliott Pribb now. And I think that's, is that Metallic in there? Yes, the 39. Another car facing the wrong way. Crivello again. Ellisler is facing the wrong way on pit road. Chaos at the entrance.
A lot of cars facing the wrong way. A lot of cars. It looked like the 39 of Metallic may have just come in entirely too hot, locked up the brakes, and drove hard into the left rear of the 9 of Chris Elliott. An unfortunate incident at the entrance of pit road. But again, I believe we are still clean and green out on the racetrack, but that's going to put a lot of drivers in a hurt moving forward.
Yeah, that's at least 2 playoff contenders involved in those 2 pit road incidents, Seminara in the 712 and Ellisler in the 26. Now, I don't think that Billy Ellisler sustained any damage, but due to the fact he had to 180 his race car and turn it back the correct direction, that loses him a lot of time, subsequently a lot of positions when everything cycles around.
Yeah, and it looks like right now Joe DeSpirito and Bernie Mobbs are the 2 cars up to speed. However, the cars just coming off pit road are now in the middle of the backstretch, being led by the number 8 of Jeremy Jeffries. Those cars are at about 190 miles per hour now. So I think DeSpirito and Mobbs are still going to have a little bit of work to do to catch up with those lead cars, but give them a lap or so. I think we'll be pretty closed up once again. But those first 5 cars are nose to tail. The 088 of Novsker peeling off the racetrack. Not sure if he may have sped into the pits or won out onto the grass in the melee, but there are 2 more cars, 3 more cars again in. Now just 4 cars. Jeffries, McClure, the 77 of Garrett, and the 88 of Wesley lead them off into turns 1 and 2.
We saw the second incident on pit road happen live. We caught only the tail end of the Bob Seminara incident on pit road, so we're going to go back and look at the replay of that right now. And it looks like the 24 was nowhere around him, so I'm assuming that it was just maybe a case of locking up the brakes, as you stated there, for the 712. We'll see if that's indeed the case. And yeah, I don't know what it is, but I've watched these drivers in practice numerous weeks, and it seems like that car that takes the inside line coming to pit road, I don't know if there's a grip change there or what, but it's like the back end wants to snap around when you come down that extreme inside line.
Well, and the other thing to take into consideration as well, Seth, when you're on that extreme inside line, you can't quite arc it into pit road the same as you would if you're on that outside line. You can use your brakes, slow yourself down, and downshift all at the same time. But when you're cutting that wheel a little harder to the left than you want to, it is extremely conducive for that right rear to just hop out from under you. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now. We have the 24 of Despirito to the low line being pushed by the 90 of Mobbs and Bobby Farrell. They're going to get up to the left rear quarter panel of the 17 of McClure off turn 4. We've got a race again, Seth.
We do. We've got 2 lines of 4, and we've got a couple of stragglers back there as well. I believe that is John Godfrey in the 711, and I think that is the lap machine, the 56 of Crivello, who I think got a 30-second penalty. I think he missed the commitment line when they all came to pit road. So right now you got 10 cars up in this lead pack, 9 of them currently on the lead lap. There's a little door bang in there between Mobbs and Donnie Garrett.
Yeah, they got a little bit close. Again, it looks like they're trying to share that middle line, just not working very well at the moment. But it looks like these 9 or 10 cars that are at the front probably will be about it after all the melee that we saw on pit road. Those incidents going to set a lot of guys off the pace. There is another string of about 3 or 4 cars that are just now exiting turn 4. However, with these lead cars lining up, I'm not so confident they're going to be able to catch back up to them without a caution. So we went from a full field all tangled up together, Seth, to now just about 10 cars battling it out here through 1 and 2 on lap number 24.
And a lot of stuff must have happened there on pit road. We tried to cover all of it, but there may have been some stuff we missed, because I'm seeing a lot of our playoff contenders now outside of the top 20. Seminara, after his spin, is back in 21st. Dante Ricky, 22nd. Billy Ellis, 23rd. Jessica Shelton's all the way back in 26th position. So at least 4 of our 8 playoff contenders having difficulties here on pit road.
Well, and even if they weren't involved in contact or in the accidents that happened, assuming that they were behind those incidents, they very likely had to come to a complete stop on pit road to avoid hitting anybody or anyone hitting them. So even just a couple seconds on pit road, Seth, that's going to cost you a lot of time, especially when you've got lead cars running out in a draft, as we see these first 9 or 10 cars doing right now. These guys are cruising around here at 195, 196, and when you have something like that happen to you and you come out and cars are way spread out in front of you, you can't quite tuck up to anybody and get a draft and build that momentum the way that these leaders are right now. So barring any caution, I don't foresee anybody, really catching back up to this lead pack, but we're still not quite halfway through the race yet. So there's still a lot of racing left to go.
Fallout after that first round of green flag pit stops. We saw Cy Jones and Manny D both getting put a lap down on the racetrack. Bob Dixon, Jay Crivello, Josh Metallic, they lost laps on pit road. Wayne Pribnow and Richard Martin, they actually had to come back down pit road. But I'm hearing that a number of drivers actually received some black flags, and I have to assume a lot of it would have to be in part to those stack-ups we saw there on those 2 entrance to pit lane.
Yeah, between guys probably speeding on the pits or speeding into the pits inadvertently, trying to avoid everything that's happening. And then another thing that, some people don't take into consideration, if you get even a single tire off of pit road out into the grass, and we saw a lot of cars out into the grass, that's going to net you an unsafe pit entry penalty. And we saw quite a few cars have to serve penalties for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it may have been the case in that scenario right there.
So we talked about the fact that 4 of our 8 playoff contenders now find themselves outside of the top 15. The 4 drivers that are looking good, if this thing were to go green to the end, you got your race leader Grant Wesley, Joe DeSpirito in 3rd, Chuck will make that actually now 5th. Chuck McClure up there in 3rd place and Bernie Mobbs in 6th. So they're the drivers that are hoping a caution doesn't come out. The other 4 playoff contenders, they would love to see a caution come out just as long as they're not the one bringing the yellow flag out.
Oh, they're praying for a caution at this point. Any little thing that they see out on the track, any car that they see, even get a little bit sideways, man, they are hoping for that yellow because they need it right now. Probably more so, if I had to guess, the 712 of Seminara than anybody, who I would assume probably took a lot of damage with that nose impact at the entry of pit road here. But right now, we see Grant Wesley still leading the field over Jeremy Jeffries and Chuck McClure. Chuck McClure, a driver who actually missed a race in the first round of playoff round number 1. He still managed with a good run to lock himself into stage number 2. So he's sitting pretty right now in 3rd, and he would love to get up there and get a win too. We've seen him run really well here this season.
Yeah, he's been really close a number of times. I think he's got either 2, maybe 3 runner-up finishes this season. Right behind him, you got Donnie Garrett, who, many weeks we've been saying has been up in the conversation for the victory. Finished top 3 last time out here 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to go back to the question that you had about Tim Nofsker and the damage sustained, about that car possibly not being up to speed. I've been watching him on the running order. He, at one point, was running with Dante Ricky in the 20th position. That's where he currently is still. And I'm not necessarily certain that car is up to full song, because it's almost looking like Dante Ricky might possibly have a car fast enough to pass him, but currently just trying to formulate a little bit of an alliance here to keep the both of them on the lead lap.
Well, onboard telemetry heading it off down into turn 1 was showing those 4 cars, namely the 84 of Ricky, was setting sail at 199. They do have a few cars ahead of them. It looks like Rodney Sullins in the 038, the 9 of Chris Elliott, and the 00 of Wayne Pribnow. They're getting a draft off them, and they're only hitting about 200 miles per hour at the end of the back straightaway. So I do question if there is damage on the nose of that 712. It looks like they're moving at a pretty good clip at this point. Ricky is all over the back bumper of the 712, but they're now making a move to the inside of those 3 red and orange cars. We'll see if they can keep this momentum up, but running in 20th position right now, especially, if you're Bob Seminara, I don't think that's a very comfortable spot to be at, not for race number 1 of round number 2.
And there's your other 2 playoff contenders there, Jessica Shelton, Billy Elliser. They're running with Tim Nofsker and Mark Paglia. That's 23rd back through 27th. They hit the line now. Race leaders are coming through the middle of the tri-oval. So that group of 4, they are rapidly approaching being put a lap down.
Yeah, and we do see the leaders, they've got about, it looks like 10 or 11 cars that are all completely lined up. They're not racing. They're making good speed around the racetrack right now. Jeremy Jeffries, who is pushing Wesley, not getting overly aggressive about it. Again, 200 miles an hour as they head off into turn number 3. At this rate, the number of cars that they have in this pack as comparison to what, the 84 and the 712 have, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if potentially after the next round of pit stops, which were amazingly enough only about 4 or 5 laps away already from, I wouldn't be surprised if something doesn't happen if Ricky and the 712 of Seminara find themselves trying to stay on the lead lap.
Right now, you've got 10 cars up in this lead pack, 9 of them on the lead lap. And look at some of these names we've got up here, because we talked about, obviously, the playoff contenders want to win, lock themselves into the Final Four. But you've got Chris Emery in the 222, John Godfrey in the 711, Bobby Farrell there in the 45. They're bringing up the tail end of this lead group, looking for their first win of the season. Could be some underdog stories in the making here.
Well, and Seth, if you think about it, these are some guys that we've seen run extremely competitive throughout the course of this season, but they're also guys that have run into a ton of bad luck, especially if you think about the 45 of Farrell. We saw him go for a big tumble a couple weeks ago. Guys like the 711, the 222, we've talked to all these guys. We know that they're capable. We know that they're competitive, and we know that they want to get up there and contend for a top 3 finish, if not a win. And, if all keeps going as the way it is right now, they've got themselves in a position to do so tonight. So we'll see if they can capitalize that toward the end of tonight's race.
We know that 2 drivers will advance into the Final Four through points. We can have a maximum of 2 playoff drivers lock themselves in through wins here this week and next week. But can you imagine if we ended up having 2 non-playoff contenders win here this week and next week and have it come down completely to points as to the 4 drivers that we're going to be heading to the season finale?
Well, this is Talladega. It is very unpredictable. I wouldn't rule out that potential. And this format can be extremely stressful on the drivers in that way. It's extremely dramatic and exciting for us as commentators and viewers to watch, but for these guys, it's those sort of unknowns. Those are exactly the reason that you want to try to be running up front all the time. You want to try to secure those victories. That way you can perish that thought from your mind of a couple guys that aren't in contention coming up and potentially knocking you out of a championship run. So we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be exciting.
Definitely pit road played a factor into our playoffs. It played a factor into who's running where, who's a lap down, who's in danger of going a lap down. It also played a bit of a factor into our Tally Challenge bracket coming into tonight's race. Currently, Joe DeSpirito, who won the winner's bracket, still with a bye week, waiting to see who he's going to take on next week. The battle for the winner of the loser's bracket is between Jessica Shelton and Bob Dixon. Both of those drivers got a black flag under that pit stop cycle. And right now, Jessica Shelton runs on the lead lap, barely in the 24th position. Bob Dixon currently in the 30th position. So it's going to be interesting to see here as we get close to the end of this race, which one of those drivers are going to be moving on to take on Joe DeSpirito. And then according to the way that the Tally Challenge bracket works, whichever one of them move on to take on Joe DeSpirito, they have to beat him not only next week, but the following week in order to claim the challenge bracket, the bracket challenge championship, I should say.
Beat Joe DeSpirito. That may be one of the funnier things that I've heard all season long, whether it comes to pole positions or just outrunning him on a racetrack, which very few people have been able to do. Not a single race outside of the top 10 for the 24 of DeSpirito. He's put on one heck of a showing this season. No slowing down, coming off a championship last season, looking to do the same again this year. But it looks like leaders starting to get a little bit racy as the 17 of McClure looks to the inside of the 8 of Jeffries into 3.
And this is interesting because, as you said, we're not too far away from when these drivers are going to have to start thinking about coming to pit road again. And I have to wonder, for these top 9, do you maybe all say, hey, we've got ourselves in a great position right now. We're turning great lap times, running single file in formation. If this thing goes green to the end, it's going to be one of us 9 to sell this thing out. We saw on the first round of pit stops about half the field come to pit road the first time, and then the rest of the field came down the second time. Do these 9 all make sure they come down pit road together, leave together to keep this strategy going up until the end of this race?
I think that you have to, Seth. These 9 or 10 cars at the front, there is Jeff Crivello. He is running in the 10th car in line there. He is, however, a lap down at this point. But with as many cars as you have, there's very few other packs out there on the racetrack right now that have more than these guys do. So 100%, I think you want to stay together. And I think we're going to see him start peeling off. It looks like the 222 of Emery. It looks like he's going to come down on his own, though. They're going to stay out another lap.
Ooh, almost got to wonder if maybe a little cat and mouse being played here. Maybe some drivers are signaling I'm coming to pit road and may have caught the 222 flat-footed. Maybe this is strategy, though, on the part of Chris Emery, but he's got no friends to leave pit road with him.
No, that's definitely going to hurt the 222 unless he gets lucky and can find a pack to draft with and he comes out of the pits. But I think the leaders have to pit. I think if you're the first 3 or 4 cars in this pack right now, you almost have to pit. And we did see the Florida gang did make the first round of pit stops last cycle, so I wouldn't be surprised to see all 8 of these cars come in together. And it looks like the 4 or 5 cars toward the back are letting off a little bit, and they are going to try to pit together. Everybody makes it in clean and green.
Ooh, contact between McClure and DeSpirito. That may be costly for the 17.
That may be costly for the 17, but the thing I'm more concerned about, Seth, and I couldn't tell at the angle that I was looking, it looked as though potentially the 24.
Sorry to cut you off there. Ronnie Sullivan's just spun Jeremy Jeffries coming out of his stall. Now Donnie Garrett has been spun.
Man, we've seen all the action on pit road. What I was about to say is I'm kind of concerned that the 24 of Despirito didn't get a tire off into the grass, which again would be a penalty, but a completely random incident occurring on pit road that none of us saw coming, that is going to completely break up the complexion of that lead pack now, Seth.
Yeah, it was 9 drivers coming to pit road. Well, actually 8 drivers coming on the lead lap altogether. Looks like we're going to have 3, 4, maybe 5 that'll be able to come out together this time. Definitely breaking up that lead group. And the 222 of Chris Emery might actually have caught a break. He might be able to get up here with this lead pack again. I'm actually surprised about that based on the fact he came to pit road all on his lonesome. He's got Tim Knofsker to draft with in the 088. They're about to catch up to Bobby Farrell, so that 222 might still be back in the conversation for this win, but now you've only got a group of 3 currently out in front with Wesley, McClure, and Despirito.
Yeah, and if you look behind them, there are another group of 3 or 4 cars, but I'm not entirely sure if any of those have damage or will need to come in to serve a penalty, and it looks like one of them did. So right now, there's 4 cars up front. Once they pick up this lap car of Manny D in the 710, that is going to be 4 cars, and they'll very likely pick up the next 3 cars that they're coming up on the racetrack with as well. I don't foresee anybody being able to catch this top 3 right now, Seth, barring a caution.
Yeah, that's the only way that these drivers will be able to get back into the conversation is, see there, Billy Elliser and Jessica Shelton, they are going to go a lap down. So now they really need a caution because they would both be in the free pass positions with where they currently run. Actually, check that. Billy Elliser just lost the second free pass position to Mark Paglias, so he's got to get back up there around the 28. But we've seen pit road twice already play huge factors with playoff contenders and non-playoff contenders alike. Here's the bad news. These guys can't make it on fuel the rest of the way. They are still going to be about 6 to 8 laps short. They've still got one more trip to pit road in their future.
Yeah, and barring any sort of major mechanical failure out on the racetrack, with everybody broken up and split up the way they are, I don't see an incident bringing out a caution anytime soon. But as we see the 94 and the 28, Shelton and Paglia, they are going to catch back up to those top 3 cars. Now, what that's going to do is that's only going to make the leaders faster in comparison to the cars that are behind them out on the racetrack. This is going to be the fastest pack out on the racetrack right now. As you mentioned, they're probably going to be looking at another round of green flag pit stops. Now, what I find...
Sorry, we had Manny D up there in the wall in the tri-oval, but he kept it going.
He keeps it going. He is still clean and green. Leaders now coming up on the 2 of Middleton. But as I started to say, it makes me kind of wonder. We have seen a round or 2 of green flag pit stops in a race or 2 over the second half of the regular season. Most of the pit stops have been made under green. So every pit stop made tonight, or all the other cautions being under yellow, my apologies. So everything we've seen tonight has, however, been under green. So it kind of makes you wonder if those guys got a little bit spoiled. Now, we know that these guys can make green flag pit stops. We know they're good enough to do it. But considering this is a very high stress situation, there's a lot of cars on pit road right now, and we are still clean and green. It makes you wonder if maybe it's just forcing mistakes just a little bit.
Yeah, it could be the nerves of drivers kind of feeling like wanting to be in the same situation that Joe Despirito was 3 weeks ago. If I want to go into next week knowing I'm battling for that championship, and so I've got to make sure that I hit everything perfectly and maybe go over the edge just a little and see if I can get away with it. Maybe thinking they need that little extra something, as we saw Hank Middleton got put a lap down. Tiff Knofsker has been put a lap down. So again, that round of green flag pit stops putting a number of strong contenders off the lead lap as Wesley continues to show the way. We have had 3 drivers now retire from the race, and these were all after that second round of green flag pit stops. Manny D, who we just saw get the wall, he's out of the race. Jerm Lewis and Bob Dixon also have taken their cars back to the garage area. We're currently running with 18 cars on the lead lap. Another driver that I know did receive a penalty, I don't know if it was speeding or if it was commitment line, was Dave Melson in the 13. He is the next driver that these leaders are starting to catch up onto to try and put a lap down.
Yeah, and everybody, I think all you're seeing right now is you're seeing guys just be comfortable. They know that there's not a whole lot going on the racetrack right now. There's no sense in jockeying for position when it's only going to lose you momentum to those leaders. So it's going to be interesting to see if we make it all the way around for green flag pit stops. And that's another thing that I would like to point out, Seth. When you think about it in the grander scheme of things, how high pressure it already is under a green flag pit stop, but now you've also got, when you're making a green flag pit stop, the added pressure of knowing that you need to stay with a pack, because if you fall out of a lead pack, as we are seeing right now, you're essentially not even in contention for that win anymore. Right now, it's only those top three drivers, all the cars behind them running a lap down at this point.
Yep, you got to go about 7.5 seconds behind these top three before you find fourth, fifth, and sixth. That is Bobby Farrell, Chris Emery, and John Godfrey. Then you go further back and you find Andre Mahjong, I believe Donnie Garrett, Bernie Mobbs. Those are the drivers in this pack that are on the lead lap. I mean, these guys are just so spread out, and it's interesting because we do have a chance of this race possibly going green all the way to the finish. This is how we started out the season. It was the only race so far this year. It was the first race of season 51 of the Tally Challenge. We ran all 66 laps without a caution coming out, and who would have guessed, in the middle of a high stakes playoff situation, we may be looking at doing it again.
Yeah, and that's just extremely circumstantial. That's part of the super speedway racing. It's part of the nature of Talladega. As we have talked about, race after race after race after race, the unpredictability factor, you can never quite tell the way that a race is going to play out, just because there are so many factors that go into it. And once again, that's something that we've seen tonight. Green flag pit stops and major issues under green flag pit stops, spreading this field out. And the farther out this field is spread, the less likely we are for a chance of an incident. So right now, everybody in just kind of conservation mode and try to survive to the end of the race.
You know, I'm looking at these drivers up here that are in the hunt for this win as things stand right now. Wesley, a two-time winner. Despirito, a two-time winner, has won the last 2 times these guys have been at Talladega. You've got Chuck McClure right there in the middle looking for his first win. You've got Shelton and Paglia both the lap down behind them. It's almost seeming to me, if we end up having this scenario where it's only these 3 drivers at the end, they may have to rely on a lap machine to push them to the win, because I very much doubt any of the 3 will work with each other to try and push them to the front, because all 3 of them are playoff contenders.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you on that more, Seth. There's room to put cars 4 wide on this racetrack, and there's only 3 guys, as we look at it right now, that would be running in contention for a win. So that kind of makes you wonder, who do those leaders want to work with? They've got Shelton behind them. They've got Paglia behind them. Both racers who we know are extremely competitive and really good on these super speedways. So how do you start figuring out, especially if you're Grant Wesley, because you're the lead car right now? You know that there's a couple lappers back there behind you, but they're not working with you the way that the 17 of McClure is right now.
And you've also got to factor in as well, you know, we've still got that round of green flag pit stops looming, waiting in the wings. We may have a couple more cars that would be here in this pack when we get down to the closing stages. Plus the fact, if you look ahead of these leaders, it's a pretty big group of cars just up ahead of them that they're about to reel in that would be able to merge with them. You got Melson, Martin, Perry Bond, Bob Seminara, Dante, Ricky, Rodney Sullins all up here. So, you know, that's 6 more drivers you can try and work with to try and help push you to the win.
Absolutely. And you know that those leaders are trying to catch a draft off those cars right now, because that would put them at a tremendous advantage. If those 3 can catch that big pack of cars and they can make the speed of double the cars that they have now, that would be huge for them. That would be a weight off their shoulders. They only have to worry about the top 3 of them. And we see that pack. They are racing side by side right now. So the more that they do that, the faster that these leaders are going to catch them. However, the way that I'm looking at it, Seth, I think at the rate that they are closing on those lap cars, if they are able to catch them, it would probably be about the time that they need to duck down onto pit road for our next round of green flag pit stops.
And you saw in the middle of that pack that these leaders are catching Bob Seminara and Dante Ricky, so that would then make it a 3-way fight for lucky dog positions between them and that 94 of Jessica Shelton, who also, if they catch up there, could pick up some spots passing some of those machines. Right now, Shelton a lap down in 19th. If she were able to pass a couple of those cars, that'd put her up inside the top 15. So not only are we going to have a dogfight for this win, we could end up having a dogfight for the 2 free pass positions if we get a late race yellow.
Oh, absolutely, because you know the 712 and the 84, they are going to absolutely fight tooth and nail to try to stay on that lead lap in case a caution flag does come out, so they can cycle themselves back around and get right up to the back bumpers without having to worry about starting behind the field in a lucky dog position. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration right now. There's a lot of strategy actively being played out, even though it looks like we are pretty strung out in single file at this point here on lap number 51.
Fuel window is open for these drivers to make it the rest of the way should they choose to pit. The furthest they could stretch it would be around lap 58. From there, they would have to come to pit road, and it would set them up for a shootout with less than 10 laps to go. The big question is, though, we've got Wesley, Despirito, and McClure right now, the top 3 that are trying to battle for this win, but are all 3 of them going to be there after the pit stops are finished?
I mean, the way that the pit stops have played out to this point, it is very possible that none of the 3 of them will still be in contention after this next round of green flag pit stops. But we do see those cars are closing in on that pack of cars ahead of them. It's little by little. It's not huge gains at this rate, but they are definitely closing on them. Again, as I mentioned, Seth, I think it'll be interesting to see, will they be able to catch them before they do have to duck down onto pit road for pit stops? If not, I wouldn't be surprised to see if everything stays clean and there are no further incidents on pit road, if those 2 groups of car end up kind of merging together as one once we get back up to speed again.
Based off the telemetry I'm seeing, this group here is gaining about 2 to 3 tenths on the group ahead of them every lap. This pack, they're running about 48 ones. The group ahead of them are running around a high 48 fours. So they are getting reeled in little by little. And we know that when the 88 of Grant Wesley, if he's able to latch onto the draft of the last car of this pack, Perry Bond, that gap's just going to close even quicker.
Right, and the telemetry at the end of the back straightaway right now is showing the 88 of Wesley going in at a clip of about 199 miles per hour. If they get a little sniff of that draft of those cars ahead of them, I wouldn't be surprised to see that get up to around the 203 mark, because McClure is working the back end of that 88 car really hard right now. Any place that he can push that 88 on the racetrack is what he's doing, because you know those top 3, and you look at the 24 of Despirito as well, he's all over the back end of that 17 car. They want to catch that pack of cars because they know that added speed will be that added advantage over those cars that are running 4th and 5th way behind them right now.
You know, it's interesting. We were talking earlier in this race about the playoffs being reformatted from round 1 to round 2. Joe Despirito with the bonus points for winning 2 races, being the regular season champion, being the points leader at the end of the first round, came in with a pretty sizable gap between himself and Bob Seminara, which then got closed down to 4 points. So he came into this reformatted round 2 as the points leader. The other 2 guys in the conversation for this victory did not carry a lot of bonus points over from round 1 to round 2. We already talked about Grant Wesley only carrying over 12. Well, Chuck McClure carried over even less. He only carried over 8 bonus points for finishing 7th in points because he didn't have any wins this season to give him those added bonus points. So out of the 8 playoff contenders, he is 8th. So talk about a guy that really would love to have a win to get himself into the Final Four, because, you know, situation points-wise, not exactly perfect for him.
No, he's coming in at the biggest disadvantage. He has the most to gain, whereas you look at the 24 of Despirito has the most to lose. So I think it's interesting, as you mentioned, the 6th and 8th place cars leading the pack right now. So we'll have to see. I think the next lap or 2, we're going to see the final green flag pit stop. Again, those leaders are now just about the length of the start-finish line to almost turn number 1 behind that other 6 cars that are leading ahead of them. But we do see the 88 has moved down into that low line, which I find even more interesting, because you can't maintain that bump draft on that bottom line the way that you can in that middle line, which kind of makes me suspect, Seth, we may see them duck in this time by.
Yeah, we saw there with Grant Wesley run that inside line. McClure got a huge shove from Joe Despirito, but then had to check up because he was right into the back of Grant Wesley. We'll see if they are going to come around to pit road this time. If not this time, they're definitely coming the next time around. Looks like we're going to wait one more lap for these drivers. And Joe DeSpirito, we were always wondering, when is he going to go to victory lane? Well, he was a 3-time winner last season when he won the championship. 1 win during the regular season, 2 wins during the playoffs. He's looking to go 3 in a row here, sweep the first 3 playoff races, as it looks like we're going to be having these 3 coming to pit road this time.
Yeah, and I do, I'm actually surprised, Seth, because they actually lost a little bit of time on those cars ahead of them by opting to move down into that low line about a lap before they came down for green flag pit stops. Obviously, it's not going to hurt them too much right now. It looks like Wesley touches that inside line just a little bit, almost got it out of the shape, but he's going to be able to hold on to it. Leader's now ducking onto pit road.
Chuck they're wrecking ahead of him. That's
Big
Ronnie
wreck.
Sullins.
Big wreck. Bob Seminara around again, sitting sideways on pit road, Seth.
Everybody having to dart left and right to avoid low contact there between Wesley and Perry Bonds. They try and squeeze around the 712. Looks like our top 3 got through, but at the same time, Chuck McClure was able on pit road to take the lead away from Grant Wesley before they even hit their pit stalls.
Chuck McClure is going to leave the pits with a tremendous lead over the 24 and the 88. I don't think it'll be anything too bad. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to get him in trouble with the draft. However, I would be a little concerned. Oh, and I'm going to have to eat my crow, Seth. The 88 got a great run off of pit road, and he's going to blow right by McClure before they even merge back onto the track again in turn 1.
McClure going to tuck in line behind Wesley. DeSpirito comes out right behind him as well. So those 3 came down pit road, come off pit road all together. So barring a yellow flag coming out, it's going to be these 3 to settle it out. And I got to wonder what the driver of that pace car is thinking, because he says, I keep seeing smoke at the entrance of pit road. Am I able to go out there? But no, because these incidents have taken place off the racing surface down on pit lane, we have yet to see a yellow flag come out here tonight.
And it looks like we are very likely going to make the run to the end of the race. What could happen between now and the next 7.25 lap, I'm not entirely sure, but McClure now diving low. McClure having to come down to serve a penalty.
Oh man, that is so tough for Chuck McClure, because it was looking like for a brief moment, if he had not gotten a penalty, he and the 88 of Grant Wesley might have possibly been able to 2-car tandem away from Joe DeSpirito. Now DeSpirito has his teammate, the lap machine of Bob Seminara, pushing him to the front.
The 88 of Wesley got absolutely freight trained on the outside of the racetrack when he lost the help of the 17 of McClure. He was only running about 187 miles per hour at the start finish line. The 24 and the 712 had an easy 7 or 8 miles an hour on him and just waltzed by. However, that is going to set Wesley back up to again regain the draft of the 24 and 712 off of turn number 4. We're going to have a bigger pack here at the end of the race than we did the entire last 2 runs combined, Seth.
Yeah, Chuck McClure having to pit there is going to lose a lot of positions and a lot of points. That's going to put him in a rather sticky situation heading into the elimination race next week. But going back to Grant Wesley, this is when you start to put on the diplomatic suit. You're talking to Paglia, Perry Bond, Jessica Shelton. You're saying, hey, I need help to get around these 2 Florida boys. I'm not going to be able to do it on my own. So he is going to be trying to be diplomatic right now, try and see if he can get some alliances to help him get around this 24 as we're closing in on 5 laps to go.
Well, and if I'm Joe DeSpirito right now, yes, I have my teammate behind me on my back bumper to help me out, but I don't think that's the position that I want to be in. We heard mention of these guys saying, hey, we're pretty sure these guys are figuring this Florida boy thing out, and, they're not giving us as much leeway out on the racetrack. So if you're only those 2 cars, assuming that, more would go with Wesley than would go with those 2, they might be in trouble coming at a final run here at the finish of the race.
We saw Rodney Sullen spinning out in front of the leaders when they came to pit road. He's had to come down the pit lane to serve a black flag. And you just saw another playoff contender, the 84 of Dante Ricky, get put a lap down. I believe currently we've only got 4 of our 8 playoff contenders on the lead lap. Bob Seminara, the highest of the lap machines, currently there in the free pass position in the 14th spot.
Well, and that brings up something else very, very interesting for us to think about, Seth. We know there's a couple lappers that are in contention right now. Jess Shelton is in this line. Dante Ricky is in this line. Bob Seminara is in this line. All three of those drivers are still running for positions as well. So while the first two cars on the field, the 24 of Despirito and Grant Wesley, are running respectively in positions 1 and 3 on the racetrack, those two guys got a race to run here coming to the finish with about 4.5 laps to go. But those lappers behind them are also in contention and going to be looking to secure those points as well. So we might see a couple different races coming down as Dante Ricky with some bad side-to-side warp. That's going to force him up out of the draft. That's going to hurt.
Definitely is going to hurt. And if they get around here to the start-finish line, it's going to turn into what you said, a battle for position now between Ricky Shelton and Seminara, rather than a battle for the free pass position, because now hitting the line, a caution between now and the white flag would end the race under yellow. Grant Wesley, he was able to shake that 712 out of line. Now it's just he and Despirito at the front.
That is not what the number 24 of Despirito wanted to see. Not only do you lose your teammate, but you have a whole pack of cars behind you that are hungry to beat you. And we see a few cars now jumping to that high line. Paglia now pushing the 88 of Wesley off at the end of the back stretch. Wesley is going to be able to complete that pass. Here comes Seminara in the 712 to the back of Despirito on 3 and 4.
And he's going to try and help push the 24, but there's nobody down there to help him. Wesley, Paglia, Melson, Perry Bond, they're all up on the top side. 88 and 28 now tucked down to the inside, contact as Melson almost goes up into the wall.
3 laps to go here at the line. Grant Wesley out to a comfortable lead with the 28 of Paglia. However, Paglia with about a car length and a half back to Despirito. That is going to give Despirito that momentum run off of turn 2 onto the backstretch. We'll see if he and Bob Seminara can do something with that. Side by side behind them is Seminara and the 13 of Melson. Now the 94 of Shelton and Melson. First 4 cars single file. Wesley, Paglia, Despirito, Seminara.
So now does Paglia try and play some defense for Grant Wesley? He helped push him to the front. You got that battle back there between the lap machines. They're lined up nose to tail. Seminara, Shelton, and Dante Ricky. They're basically battling to see who can finish 15th here in the finishing results. First car 1 lap down. Well, actually, second car 1 lap down behind Paglia as 2 laps to go for Grant Wesley in the 88, looking for his league-leading 3rd win of the season.
See, now I'm interested in seeing what does Paglia do here in these last couple laps, because we did see him giving a shove to that 88 to help get him to the front, but Paglia with nothing to gain, at the same time, nothing to lose either. He is a lap down the first car 1 lap. He's going to look to the outside. A good block from Wesley on the inside on Despirito into 3.
Oh, boy. Grant Wesley has lost his wingman. Paglia drops to the back, and now Despirito is lined up with Seminara. Grant Wesley's going to have to make that 88 about 4 lanes wide as here comes Joe Despirito to the top. He's got help. Wesley all by his lonesome on the inside as they come down to take the white flag.
Wesley, absolutely nobody to help give him a push. He did not throw a dirty block on the 24 of Despirito. He recognized that Despirito had the run, recognized that he had the line, and let him go. Coming off of turn number 2, it is Joe Despirito over Bob Seminara and Shelton. Those 2 cars that I just mentioned still 1 lap down. Grant Wesley falling back to the inside line, about the 6 car back, heading off into turn 3. Joe Despirito seeing clear skies ahead of him, looking for consecutive win number 3 here at Talladega.
Looking to sweep the first 3 races of the playoffs. Grant Wesley's got to pass 5 cars to get up to Joe Despirito. As how about this, the defending champion, winless during the regular season. He's going to go back to back to back. Despirito is locked into the Final 4.
Despirito will pull off the victory. Grant Wesley will come across in second position. A dominating performance for the 24 again. Not in the sense that he dominated the entire race, but he got to the front where he needed to be at the end, put himself into position, used patience after falling back just a little bit after losing his teammate, the 712 of Seminara, and getting back up there when it mattered. Joe Despirito, last year's defending champion, setting up for another huge run here as we complete race number 1 of stage 2 of the playoffs here at Talladega.
And Zach, you touched on it. When you come to Talladega, you don't know what type of a race you're in for. Sometimes it's about strategy, fuel strategy, tire strategy, pit strategy. Sometimes it's about luck and positioning, making sure you're going to be away from a wreck when and if it happens. Tonight, I think the main point of this race was all about execution.
Execution is 100%. The first two cars that finished this race, being Despirito and Wesley, are absolutely the two drivers that made the least amount of mistakes. They made the smartest moves on pit road, on the racetrack, while a number of other drivers were caught up in incidents. So he executed. That's exactly what he said he would do. And we talked to him earlier in the season. He said he would give up all those pole positions for a victory. Now he's got 3 of them. That's got to feel pretty good.
You think he'd give him up now? Probably not. Anyway, Joe Despirito, though, I mean, 3 weeks ago, he won the first playoff race. He knew he was locked into the round of 8. And again, he can head into an elimination race, this time in round 2, worry-free, knowing that he can go out there, maybe try and win 4 in a row. Regardless of where he finishes next week, he will be one of the 4 drivers to battle for the championship in 2 weeks' time. And, we focused on Despirito and Wesley because they were up here in the conversation for the win. They were the playoff drivers. But look at some of these guys that finished out the top 5. John Godfrey in 3rd, Bobby Farrell in 4th, Andre Mahjong in 5th. Great jobs by those guys. They weren't up there in the conversation for the win, but they also fit into that category of drivers that executed during this 66 lap event.
100%. And Godfrey and Farrell, namely, being two of the cars that we talked about earlier in this event that we saw running good, and we mentioned, hey, these guys could pull out a really good showing tonight. That's exactly what they do. Donnie Garrett, Chris Emery, Chuck McClure, Bernie Mobbs, Jeremy Jeffries, they will round out your top 10. Your pole sitter on the night, Jason Scheck, finishing in position number 11th, Wiley Coate finishing 12th, 13th going to Glenn Harris, Bob Seminara, Jessica Shelton will finish in positions 14th and 15th, 1 lap down. Farther down, we've got Dante, Ricky, Perry Bond, Dave Melson, Mark Paglia, Josh Metallic, rounding out your top 20 with Tim Knofsker, Jeff Crivello, Billy Elliser, Chris Elliott, Richard Martin in position 25. A little bit farther down, a couple laps down, Stefan Martel, Cy Jones, Wayne Pribnow, Hank Middleton, Rodney Sullins will round out your 30th place car, with 31st, 32nd, 33rd going to the retired cars of Manny D, Jerm Lewis, and Bob Dixon, respectively.
And as we look here at the finishing results, you can see drivers like Seminara, Shelton, and Dante Ricky. Yes, they managed to still finish up there in 14th, 15th, and 16th, despite being a lap down. And, people would consider, despite the fact that they ran into some issues, they still were able to bring out some rather decent finishes. But we have to remember that last time's elimination race, only 2 drivers were eliminated from the playoffs. Next week, 4 drivers are gone. So there's going to be some drivers that we've seen up inside of the top 5 in the point stands pretty much the entire season that could be down below that cut line heading into next week.
Yep, the pressure is on. It's going to be especially on for guys like, Billy Elliser. It's going to be on for Chuck McClure. Guys that we've seen be able to pull these things out, but just have some really bad luck here tonight and things not go exactly the way that they wanted them to. Chuck McClure could essentially taste a win when he sped onto pit road, which cost him a lot of time, relegating him to an 8th place finish here tonight.
Let's see if we can get some interviews with our top 3 finishers here this evening. And I believe this is his first podium finish of the season. Let's get a word with the driver of the 7-Eleven of John Godfrey. Hey, John, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
I got you, fellas.
Man, what a race for you here tonight. Best finish of the season, heading towards the closing stages of this season. We said that this was a race that seemed all about execution. You kept yourself up there in the top 10 all night long, nailed the pit stops, and you come away with a 3rd place run. But, boy, we had a lot of drivers have some adventures here tonight. What was it like from the cockpit of the 712?
Well, Seth, we've been fast all season in the LaJoie's Town Fair Tire 7-Eleven, but just bad luck all season long, one thing or another. And tonight it all came together. Flawless race. Wish we could have stayed with those first 2 cars, but the green flag pit stops kind of separated us a bit. But yeah, just an outstanding run for the team, and we're really happy.
I mean, John, we've seen you up there in the top 10 consistently, but here tonight, did you think there was a possibility that you, the 45, the 27, we saw you guys drafting together, that you might be able to have enough cars to get up there into that lead pack, maybe be in the conversation for this win in the closing stages?
Yeah, it seemed like my fate was determined by so many people having pitting issues. I heard a lot of black flags being issued. So it, again, just managed to keep my nose clean for once, and it paid dividends.
Hey, John, Zach up in the booth. Congratulations on a really solid third place run here tonight. We heard you talk about with Seth just a second ago. A lot of bad luck. A lot of things haven't exactly gone your way this season, despite a couple really strong, fast showings. What kind of confidence does this give you with with only a few races left this season?
Oh, it's outstanding. I'm really super confident now. I wish I had made the cut for the playoffs, but there's always next season. But yeah, this is a big momentum builder, Zach.
Do you feel like with the shift tonight, and we saw a lot of the really fast lead cars, as a lot of the guys in contentions for the playoffs get themselves into trouble on pit road, assuming that you can keep your car clean and green these last few races, avoid any circumstances, again, not of your own doing, which you have found yourself caught up in most of the season. What would you say your chances are in actually being able to pull out one of those W's?
Oh, I think very good. Right now, the focus is on qualifying better and getting a little closer to the front, because I always seem to find myself way in the back at the start of these races. Tonight, I gained a lot of spots because of everybody else's misfortune. But you know what? Part of racing is luck, and I had good luck on my side tonight.
100%, John. That is absolutely a part of racing, and you capitalized on it exactly how you needed to get yourself a stout third place finish. Any sponsors, thank yous, or shout outs that you would like to make before we let you go?
Yeah, always want to say thanks to LaJoy's Scrap Processing for their support, and Town Fair Tire.
Well, that's John Godfrey. His best finish of the season happens here tonight in race 13 of the Tally Challenge. Congrats there, John, and hopefully we continue to see this consistency close out the rest of the year.
Thank you, fellas. Appreciate that.
Let's get our second place finisher, Grant Wesley. Hey, Grant, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Hey, what's up?
Well, man, I mean, we saw a lot of drivers have some difficulties here tonight, especially with pit road. Even you had a problem there on pit road trying to make your way around a couple of spinning machines on that final round. But man, up there in the conversation in the final stages of this race, looked like lap machines were going to be the deciding factor between you and Joe. What little bit more do you think you needed to do to be able to hold that 24 off to lock yourself with a win into the final four?
Oh man, whenever I seen it was just me and Joe. Well, it was me, Joe, and Chuck there for a while for that last run, or the next last run. And Chuck even said over TeamSpeak, he's like, "I wonder what we can do to screw this one up." And because we kept pulling away, we had a big lead, and we went down pit road, and everybody was perfect except for Chuck. Poor guy. He had a great run, but yeah, he was speeding, caught a black, really unfortunate. But yeah, so then it was just me and Joe, and I'm sitting here. I've never been in a situation like that, and we got down to the end of the race, and I was just trying to play scenarios out in my head, as it was changing, because we were catching more and more lap cars, and the pack was getting bigger and bigger. So I was sitting there trying to figure out who would work with who, and when we picked up Bob Seminara, I pretty well knew that him and Joe were going to hook up, so that was going to make it even more challenging. And I think I made a move there with like 3 to go, and I got around them, and I was up front. Had Mark Paglia pushing me. Appreciate the help, Mark. And things were looking good. And then as soon as they were looking good, it looked bad. I seen Joe coming, and there's really nothing I could have done. I really don't know what I could have done different.
Yeah, we saw the 28 pushing you up there to the front, and then he kind of got shuffled out and started falling back. We knew that it was going to come down to somebody either pushing you or somebody pushing Joe to this victory. When you caught that group of cars and had about 6 machines behind you, how much wheeling and dealing happened there between you and some of those machines? Or were you kind of in the, I'm going to let this play out and see who's actually going to work with me and who isn't?
Yeah, honestly, there wasn't any wheeling and dealing. I had DMAR on my Whisper. I mean, I was talking to him he was willing to help me. But other than that, I was just kind of letting it play out. And like I said, Mark Paglia, he usually helps, and I figured he'd go with me too. Um, but yeah, I was just my plans were to make the car as wide as I could. But I mean, whenever I seen a row of 5 cars coming, I couldn't have done nothing about that.
Hey Grant, Zach, congratulations on a really strong second place showing tonight. Now I know this one stings a little bit because for a moment we saw the 24 lose his partner on the 712 of Bob Seminara, which must have perked you right up when you saw that happen. Give you just a little bit more hope that. But when those two hooked back up and just made an absolutely astounding move to the outside of you heading off into turn one there. How much did your heart sink when that happened? Because we saw you lost Chuck, and we knew that you two had worked really well together. But when it came right down to it, you had the opportunity to put the big block on Despirito, but you did the more gentleman thing, and you recognized that he had that run and that momentum behind him. Was there anything you think you could have done differently in that scenario?
No, not really. I mean, anytime, if it's one car that jumps out there and then there's another one that jumps out and they don't have a lot of momentum, you can block that line. But whenever you see that line coming, it's got 5 cars with that kind of momentum. The only thing you're going to do by blocking them is just cause a big wreck. So the only thing I could do at that point was just hold my line and hope that people would bail from that line and jump in with me. I mean, you get down and get in, into the final laps. People don't usually like to stay in one line. They like to jump around and try to get some final positions. But no, I mean, I don't blame Bob for helping Joe there. That's kind of the name of the game. They're around lap 25. I was able to work my way to the front and get in front of Jeremy Jeffries, my teammate there. And I thought I was sitting pretty there until Jeremy ran into trouble on pit road also.
Yeah, that was something that we saw a lot of tonight. Speaking of which, that's actually a good talking point for me to bring up to you. Coming into tonight, you came in 6th in points. With this showing tonight, it's going to vault you all the way up to 2nd place, just 17 points behind Joe Despirito. A number of drivers running into issues on pit road, but I have to ask you, Grant, because we saw you started this season very, very strong with a couple wins in the first 4 races. But it seems like the end of the regular season and these past 2 weeks, something has been just a little off with your runs. It's a lot of it been, circumstantial sort of things that have happened around you, not of your own doing. But how much does this help you, knowing that you've got a little bit of a pad between yourself, be it only 5 points between yourself and Bernie Mobs, who's in 4th in points, but knowing that you struggled a little bit in the final those last 4 or 5 weeks that we had, how much does this help you moving forward, especially with next week being the next cutoff race before the final race?
Yeah, this is huge. Especially the last 3 weeks, they've been so rough. I've just been caught up in messes, which is not usual for me. Especially at the beginning of this season, the season was going great, and it's kind of like a wave. You ride the wave while it's here, and then it crashes, and then you don't do so well for a while. And that's what happened to me. I was on the wrong end of the deal there the past couple weeks. In fact, today is the first time I've really taken time to sit down and practice my qualifying because I was really starting to get bad at my qualifying runs there. I was starting deeper and deeper in the field, and the fact that I was able to hang on and stay in the chase by 1 point after last week's run, I knew this was time to get up on the wheel and try to get things turned around for myself. I knew I had to stay out of trouble tonight. The goal was to have a good points run. I achieved that, but also I wanted to win. It kind of sucks coming up short.
Yeah, I understand that, but still a very strong 2nd place showing, hopefully shaking that monkey off your back. Any sponsor shout outs or thank yous that you have for us tonight, Grant?
First and foremost, I'd like to thank the owners here at RTG, Terry Bauman, David Cannon, Sean Prime. And thank you guys for the broadcast. You guys do an awesome job. The the broadcast makes it so much fun to go back and watch it after the races. I know I got a lot of friends and family that watch, so it just makes it fun for everybody. I'd like to thank my teammates at XFM, and like I said, all my friends and family that watch it. And yep, that's it.
Well, that's Grant Wesley. A second place run here tonight jumps him up to second in the point standings. And even if he doesn't pick up a victory here in this round, he puts himself in a good position to point his way into the Final Four. Congrats there, Grant. And we look forward to seeing what you do next week.
All right, thanks, guys.
And down to victory lane we go for a third time in a row. It's the number 24 of Joe DeSpirito celebrating in victory lane. Hey, Joe, it's Zach and Seth up here in the Flatout Racing Network studios. You got us?
Hey, boys, I got you. What's going on?
Well, man, I mean, there is no doubt about it. This 24 car is on fire. As soon as the playoffs begin, 3 wins in a row. Not only that, tonight you are locked into that Final Four looking to defend that championship. I mean, how elated and how relieved do you feel right now?
Yeah, it's good to win race 3. I won race 3 last year, too. I've also got the bracket series going on, so next week I can kind of just focus on that. I don't know who I'm going against. I'll have to look at the standings, but yeah, it gives me a nice little buffer until race 5. A little bit of relief. Feels good.
Now, Joe, we saw after you won the first race of the playoffs, you had that monkey off your back. You knew that you were going to be locked into the round of 8. You went out the following week in the elimination race and went to victory lane. So now knowing that you're locked in that Final Four, is it same mentality when you take to the track next week?
Yeah, yep, same mentality, man. Like I say, rinse and repeat. Of course, I've got to be aware of whoever I'm facing in the bracket series, where they're at, and strategize based on where they are behind me or in front of me. But yeah, for the most part, just try to qualify good, try to stay up front, away from the wrecks, and try to finish good, try to get top 5s, top 10s, and wins great too.
Hey, Joe, it's Zach. Congratulations on win number 3. Gonna throw a couple numbers at you here. Throughout 13 races this season, you have finished in the top 10. All 13 races. You have finished in the top 5, all but 3 of those races. You've got 3 wins. You have 9 pole positions, 2 races remaining. You're on a hot streak right now. What are the chances? I'm going to give you an opportunity to call your shot right now. Let's hope it doesn't jinx you, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But could you go 5 for 5 in the chase?
Oh man, I'm not talking about this. Come on. um, I'm just trying to finish good. That's all. And luckily, I've won the last 3 races. It's just having to end up that way. Um, if that happens, that's great. But if it happens, it happens. I'm not trying to jinx myself, man. I'm knocking on wood right now.
All right, man. And I would just like you to know I'm not trying to jinx you either. I figured that would be a good question to ask you to make you just a little uncomfortable for
I
a
gotcha.
second.
Oh,
But to
it did,
get you to get you back to the on-track racing action, we saw your teammates, the 712 of Seminara, have a little bit of issue tonight on pit road. Got himself fell back quite a ways on the racetrack, but in the end ended up playing itself to your advantage. You guys got a huge run on the 88 of Wesley, who then hooked up with the number 28 of Paglia. They got back by you again, and then somehow you guys managed to vault back by that 88 of Wesley again, being that it was just the 2 of you up front. Now, I complimented Grant Wesley because he absolutely had the opportunity to throw that final block out of turn 4, which he did not, which I attest to, the respect that you guys have for each other out on the racetrack. You guys are all smart racers. You know exactly the consequences that would come with that. But when Wesley got that run and got back by you with the 28 of Paglia, how confident were you that you would be able to hook back up with somebody and get back past him again?
Yeah, they made that move and they went high on me on the back stretch there, and I tried to kind of nudge them as high as I could and wait for some help to jump low. And luckily, that blue 712 came out of nowhere, and yeah, he helped me out. That was cool. And yeah, they made their move off a little early there, and he had his buffer. 88 had his buffer with 28, and I had my buffer with the 712. So they passed us, and I made sure to get Mark out of the way there, and it was just me and Grant head to head. Of course, with some help from the 712 and some others, Jessica and Dante followed along. But um, we made that move out of 4, and yeah, he did a nice thing there. Not smacking me into the wall. I would have done the same thing. We have respect for one another, me, Grant, and a lot of other guys here. So yeah, it worked out. They made their move, we made our move, and we made ours at the right time. That's how it ended up.
That is how it ended up, with you nosed up against the wall at the start finish line, doing burnouts once again. That has become sort of your celebratory signature there. Any shout outs, sponsors, or thank yous that we have before we let you go here tonight, Joe?
I got to shout out you guys, always putting on a good show. I'm glad you guys are back with us next year, next season, season 52, FRN. Got to thank RTG, Josh, and all the guys. Got to say thanks for everybody at the post office watching, and my uncle going nuts in the live chat on YouTube, Travis. And yeah, I appreciate everybody. I'm glad to have won again, man. It's unbelievable, crazy. Thanks, guys.
That's Joe DeSpirito. We know he is going to be one of those battling for the championship in 2 weeks' time, as he is a perfect 3 for 3 in the playoffs. Once again, congratulations, Joe. We look forward to seeing if you maybe go 4 for 4 next week on your quest to claim back-to-back championships.
Woo! Thanks, guys. Good night.
And you can just hear the relief in his voice, knowing that he's going to be locked into that Final Four regardless of next week. But there are some other drivers, though. They are not feeling that sense of relief. The point standings are in here, Zach. The cutoff line drivers you mentioned is Bernie Mobbs. 5 points up is Grant Wesley. 2 points up is Bob Seminara. And then you look at the drivers that are down in the danger zone. Dante Ricky -3. Chuck McClure -6. Jessica Shelton -12, Billy Elliser -18. There's no room for error next week for really any of these drivers, because easily drivers above the cut line could fall out. Drivers below the cut line could be eliminated in the first 5 laps if they're caught up into a wreck. I mean, how in the world, at a track as unpredictable as Talladega, do you head into that race basically strategizing points at the same time, racing 3x3 that we've seen them do all season long?
Well, I'm going to tell you exactly how they do it, Seth. What they're going to do is they're going to go out, whatever day it may be here in December, they're going to try to find a 4-leaf clover. They're going to try to go out to the street and find a heads up penny somewhere. And, if you're Joe DeSpirito, you're not going to care, because you've been whooping up on them all season long. But hypothetically speaking, any one of those cars between 2nd and 8th could be in that Final Four 2 weeks from tonight. So every one of those guys is still in it, with just a 23-point spread between second place of Wesley and the 8th position of Billy Elliser. We know the number of cars that this series has out on the track at any given time, that 18 points or 23 points is totally doable. Now, we know how strong Grant Wesley is, but that being said, we've already seen a couple major upsets this season between guys not making the playoffs, guys getting knocked out in round 1 of the playoffs. Anything could happen. Next week, I think you just have to be ready to go. You have to be coming into next week's race ready to race and ready to really battle for a win, because I think that is the only thing that you can do at this point to really make yourself comfortable to be in that Final Four at season's end.
Now, as you did not want to jinx Joe DeSpirito, I don't really want to jinx the racing, but I have to say, we've had 2 races now, tonight and the beginning of the season, where we've gone caution-free. All 66 laps have been run clean and green. We have had incidents, but they haven't brought out a yellow flag. Beginning of the season, it's a clean slate. Everybody's got a chance to go to victory lane. Really surprising at a race like that, with not a whole lot on the line. If you win, you're locked into the playoffs more than likely. Surprising that we didn't have a caution in that one. Here tonight, it's a chance to be able to lock yourself into the Final Four if you go to victory lane. Other drivers, of course, out there just trying to finish out the season with a win, but no caution comes out in this one. What does that set up for next week in an elimination race? Do we see a caution-free race in that one, or do we see quite a number of yellows based on the fact it's a last chance for drivers to get into that championship picture?
To be completely honest with you, Seth, I think it's going to come down to what it came down to tonight, and it's whether or not they can make it to that first round of green flag pit stops. If they can make it to that first round of green flag pit stops, can everybody make it onto pit road without incident, without bringing caution out? And if there is no caution that comes out, can everybody make it back out onto the field? Because I think a lot of what this is we saw every time that there was a pit stop tonight. Yes, there were incidents on pit road, but every time that there was pit stops, it whittled away of the field just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And when you have less cars running as close together, less cars, being as competitive as what they are when they're, the whole field is together 2-3 wide and everybody's jockeying for positions. I think this is just kind of a byproduct of that. Now, I wouldn't by any means say that we saw a bad race tonight. We saw a race play out from the beginning to the end entirely under green in the way that a super speedway race would play out. And we still had excitement at the end. We really had excitement all the way through it, if you look at it, considering there was a lot of playoff contention drivers who found themselves in trouble early in the race and now are really going to have to fight their way into that final four, Seth. Because like we said, only 23 points separate the cars that are not yet locked in. So it is entirely possible that we could still see somebody who's not even in this top 8 come out and win a race next week and totally spoil. So there's a lot of things that could happen, but barring a win, I don't think you can come in feeling safe and secure. I think you have to go out, you have to execute, you have to perform to the best of your ability and not make mistakes, whether it be on the racetrack or on pit road. That's what's going to get you to the final four, Seth.
Absolutely echo every syllable there. I mean, we know that at least 2 drivers next week are going to have to point their way in with a playoff contender night and Joe DeSpirito going to victory lane. It's going to be a crazy one. As we mentioned, 2 weeks ago, our first elimination race, only 2 drivers were eliminated, whittling the field down from 10 to 8. Next week, half of our remaining playoff contenders will be gone. 4 will be eliminated. 4 will move on to that final round with a chance of winning the championship. But a crazy one here tonight at Talladega. Next week, a lot more on the line. Zach, cannot wait for that. Appreciate you joining me for this one here tonight.
Seth, always a pleasure working alongside you, working with everybody at FRN, working for you, the fans, for you, the racers at RTG. Thank you to all of you owners, admins, RTG, all of you guys at FRN, everybody watching on YouTube, all the racers out in Racerland. It's been fun yet again, Seth. Can't wait for next week.
Who is going to join Joe DeSpirito in that championship battle next week? We'll be determining it. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Thursday evening. For Zach Fremont, I'm Seth Cole. You've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.